Guys, what's going on? Hayden Crabtree here, and I am joined by the legendary Garrett Sutton to announce probably what's just going to change the way that all real estate investors and business owners look at LLCs. His new book, Fail Not Fail. Garrett, how you doing, man?
Good to be with you, Hayden.
Always.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Tell me a little bit about, I know you've got multiple books now. What is Fail Not Fail about, and who should be reading it?
Fail Not Fail. It's about piercing the corporate veil. When you set up an LLC or a corporation, you want to be protected. And a lot of people, Hayden, are setting these up online, and they're not aware that there are these ongoing requirements that you have to stay protected. And if you don't follow these simple requirements, it's pretty dramatic. Someone suing the corporation or the LLC, which has no money in it, can pierce the veil, go through the protections of the corporation or LLC and get at your personal money. So we set up this entity for your protection, but if you don't follow these simple rules, they can get straight at your bank account and your other assets. And what's interesting, Hayden, is in 50% of all cases, the veil is pierced. And 50%. So this means 50%, half the time, people get through the corporate veil to the individual's bank account, which means a lot of people are not following these easy formalities. And so, that's why I wrote the book. They don't teach this in school, unfortunately. And when you set up one of these online entities, they don't tell you you need to do these things once a year. So it's just more information you need to get out there and get on your own.
So I know you've written prior books about, having your own LLC, but it sounds like this book in particular is more about, okay, you have an LLC, you think that your assets are protected, but are you doing we all know the government, right? And everything that comes along with that. Are you checking the boxes that are probably easy to do, but most people just don't know they need to be checking those boxes? Is that correct? It's just kind of running over all of those in a do-it-yourself kind of format to make sure that everyday investor can just tackle these quickly once a year?
Yeah, and so I go through the various cases around the country where people thought they were protected, and the factors are such that the person was able to pierce the veil. So we go through the factors. I think going through the cases really helps. These people have been in court, their lawyers are fighting it out, and you learn from the horror stories of others what not to do and what to do to stay protected. So the book is a lot of stories. I always tell stories. That's the way to communicate legal principles. A lot of stories, a lot of practical information for people to follow.
Gotcha. Communicating through stories is the main thing. Through examples is how we all really learn. So that's awesome. And you're one of the few lawyers that can actually effectively communicate these principles. So that's great. Well, that's awesome, man. I know that there's going to be so much good stuff inside of the book. For those watching, I'm going to, right after this, I'm going to read the book and I'm going to give you my full review on it and talk to you about what I learned out of it and how I'm going to apply it to my business. So we're about to roll into that. Before we let Garrett go, for people who want to pick up Fail Not Fail, how do they do that?
Well, they can go to rda-press.com, our website. It's certainly available on Amazon. It's going to be Kindle, audiobook, print book. So it comes in all formats. So it's out there.
You going to have an audiobook on it?
We already do. Yeah.
Already do. So pick that up on Audible, right? Or is that going to be through your website?
Audible or our website.
Cool.
Yep.
Easy enough. Everywhere where books are sold, you're going to be able to find it because it's going to be a big one.
Hayden, I have to mention that the last time I think I was on with you was with my son, Ted, who's studying for the Wyoming bar exam now. And you met him at the real estate guys cruise, right? Mm-hmm. And so he goes, Dad, we've got to review Hayden's book. So we did, skip the flip. And I told him about loopholes, and I've got to congratulate you, Hayden, because most weeks, Skip the Flip is outselling loopholes. So congratulations to you.
Well, thanks so much. Just like you, we write these books to help people. I mean, we're average people who have found things that work, and a big part of our mission is to give back to those who want to do the same thing and take control of their lives. So I'm honored and thrilled by the success that Skip the Flip has had. But this success in the real estate world is a complex puzzle. The real estate side being one, and then building your team out, knowing the strategies of the legal and the tax and everything else. It takes a team. And you've been somebody who's just taught me so much about the legal. So I'm honored to be there with you, and I'm honored to be able to talk to you and help everybody get their hands on this new book.
Great. Well, I appreciate it.
Yes, sir. Well, thank you so much for your time, everybody. We're going to talk about Fail Not Fail right after this, and then be sure to pick up your copy because it's going to be a good one, and you don't want the veil being pierced, or else you're really not protecting your assets at all.
All right, gang, so we just talked with Garrett Sutton, and he did as he promised. He shipped me over a copy of the book, and we are going to unwrap it. We're gonna read it. Thanks so much, Garrett, for sending the book over beforehand. Super excited to dive into this. Let's do it. Well, bam. Veil, not fail. Protecting your personal assets from business attacks. So what I'm gonna do, guys, is I'm gonna sit down, I'm gonna read this book, and I'm going to share with you the top 3 things that I learned from it. I'm gonna recap this book, and we're gonna go over what I learned, because I think it's always super important once you read a book to summarize what you learned and what you can put into action. So I'm gonna do that for this book, and then I'm gonna share it with you. So let's get to reading. Always good to talk with Garrett, and I want to thank him so much for sending me a copy of the book after we got done talking. And this is my review of the book and what I thought. I read through it and learned some great stuff that I'm definitely going to be implementing. First off, this book, you should definitely go pick it up if you find yourself having an LLC, having a partnership, an LP, whatever it is, C Corp, S Corp, any different things. You have to read this book, because what Garrett teaches us in this book is the importance of following the proper procedures inside of your LLC. You could have an LLC to protect your assets, and if you're not doing the formalities of it correctly, if you're not properly using your LLC, then you could just be flushing money down the toilet, and there's really no need to have an LLC. So let's kind of talk about what I learned from this. First thing I learned is that every state is different. The back history of LLCs is they were created whenever the Europeans were going out and they were setting these charters to go, the East India Company, and people wanted to invest in these, but they would have been personally liable. And so LLCs were created, limited liability companies were created to limit the liability of the investors, which made it much more appealing for a lot of people back in those days. And it carried over today, and it's just having limited liabilities is great for commerce. The whole story's in here of how limited liabilities came about. It's actually super interesting, okay? So what I learned from this is that the federal government, United States government, did not set a precedent. They don't have anything about LLCs. And so therefore LLCs is left up to the state. And so whatever state you have an LLC in, you need to become familiar with how they treat LLCs. And you've probably heard this a lot. People say, well, have a Nevada LLC, have a Delaware LLC, have a Wyoming LLC. It does this, it has this feature, it has this benefit. Well, the cool thing is that every state has set their own rules about LLCs, and you can go around to different states to get different benefits, okay? And so the first thing I learned from this book is that you need to become familiar with how the state that you have an LLC in treats LLCs. That's the first biggest thing I learned. I just thought that, you know, the veil piercing would be equivalent for all LLCs, and that's definitely not the case. That's the first thing that I learned. And then the next thing that I learned is that there are, and I'm not gonna give too much away here because Garrett has written this really good. There's no clear answer. This is my note. I write the notes down in the back. There's no clear answer on when an LLC veil will be pierced, but here's how veil piercing is tested. Number 1, the alter ego test. Number 2, the instrumentality test, and number 3, single enterprise theory. And so there's not just one way, okay? But what I've learned here is that all of these are different ways that courts will use if you're being sued, where people will say, hey, should we pierce this veil or not? And what that essentially means is, should the person who is inside of this LLC be responsible for the debts and the obligations and the liabilities of the LLC itself. And you don't want that, right? If I own 100 properties and I get sued on one of them inside one LLC, I don't want the person suing me on that LLC to be able to attack all of my assets. I want it to be limited to just that one. And that's what the veil is all about. That's what limited liability is all about. Garrett goes through a lot of different cases in here talking about when a veil was pierced, when it was not pierced, why a veil was pierced, which is super valuable to read. Again, I don't want to go through each individual chapter here because I want you to go get the book. The book is worth reading. It'll serve you forever and it'll protect your assets. One interesting thing that I have highlighted here is that Garrett tells us, which I did not know, of the ways that you can protect yourself. Some of the most commons are, number one, don't try to defraud people, right? Don't do things that you know you shouldn't do. Another one of the biggest things is that not being able to separate the self from the entity. And a lot of people, like if I own a property by myself, I'm the only person inside of that LLC. And if I get sued, I have to prove that I am different than that LLC. And one of the best ways that I can do that is to run corporate formalities. And Garrett has a list of all the different corporate formalities in here. He actually has a whole chapter on it. Chapter 23 is all about properly maintaining your corporate formalities so that happens. And just one of the things that I noted here that, this is why you read, is that he says here, please also, he's talking about running your corporate formalities, making sure that all of your paperwork annually is filed correctly and on time so that there's never a period of time when you and your corporation are one and the same. Your paperwork is a huge part of that. I didn't know this. I'm gonna have to talk to my accountant, my lawyer. The US Department of Treasury will be requiring an annual report from every entity with only a few exceptions beginning in 2022. So boom, right there. I picked up one nugget that I would not have known about that's gonna save my butt in the future. So definitely read this book. You're gonna learn so much. You're gonna learn about how to maintain your corporate formalities, the ins and outs of whether you should be a member manager LLC or a manager managed LLC, what the differences are. It's filled with a lot of good stuff. Thank you, Garrett, for sending the book. Thank you, Garrett, for writing the book. It is it's an action-packed book. I'll tell you that. And so if you want the book, I'll just drop the Amazon link in the description of this video so you guys have instant access to it. The book itself is only 180 pages. It took me 3 days to get through it. Definitely worth the time. Links in the description if you guys want it. Thanks. If you enjoyed this video, subscribe and hit the like button. Share it with other people. Be great.